and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we read about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. Joining me again, second time on DM's Book Club, is John. John, how are you, my friend?
Living the dream, Fiona. How are you doing?
Well, I'm now living the dream because you said you're living the dream, so it's all good. Like, how are things with you? Last time you were here, we talked about a different kind of monster manual. We talked about it was at the time the new unearthed arcana race options, these are gothic lineages and stuff. So we had a ball last time, and since then, obviously, we've been playing our Pantheon game. And at some point, you've been DMing it for us, I will say, and it's been an absolute treat for us. So I'm very excited.
Well, it's nearly my turn to play, and
yes.
May the gods have mercy on your souls.
Oh, no.
Because however bad I am at DMing, it ain't nothing compared to what I'm like as a player.
Oh, you are being very humble. You're being very humble because that is not true at all. It's been exciting. And I can't wait for that to eventually come out. So,
well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, we're supposed to have 4 more episodes remaining in this one. And you see, if you lot stopped looking at things and stopped going in other directions and stopped doing other stuff, we'd be done in 4 sessions. My bet is somewhere near 7.
Yeah. All I can say is that we are the ideal, realistic party. Mm-hmm. What does this do? What does this do? Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen if I press
all of these buttons? Yes. That's exactly. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway. John, should I tell you what the topic is I've chosen for us today?
Yeah, absolutely should.
I will. So something I've realized with DM's Book Club over the last couple of months is that whilst we're doing amazing things like looking at different campaign settings, different mechanics, I realized that I actually don't know anything about sort of the general sort of history or sort of lore still. And it's been a while since we've looked at Mordenkainen's Tome first, but I thought, why not go back and have a look at one of the sort of the races in it? And I realized, again, to my folly, that I don't really know much about dwarves and their history at all. It's one of those races, lineages that I have never really played. And maybe it's because maybe me being biased, obviously growing up and watching Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, I was always I wanted to be an elf or something like that. And even playing in RPGs just now.
Everyone wants to be elf.
Everyone wants to be an elf. Everyone wants to be a tiefling. Everyone wants to be, an Aasimar, blah, blah, blah. Exactly.
Built-in breath weapons.
You want to be, obviously stand out from it. And then you get to sort of dwarves, classical dwarves, and you're like, oh, you got Gimli, and you got all the dwarves from The Hobbit, and obviously many other, Terry Pratchett, all that sort of thing. And you're just like, oh, maybe not. Because maybe to me at the time, they didn't seem as even though they are high fantasy and fantasy settings, I was just like, oh, they don't seem to appeal and stuff like that. So I thought, why don't we even look at the history of them that has been presented in Mordenkainen's and see if that would change certainly my view on it. And I think it has. I actually think it has. So we're going to look at Dwarves and Duergar, so the chapter 3 in Mordenkainen's. Just from your initial impressions of this chapter, John, what did you think? I mean, what was your experience with dwarves from D&D, I guess is my first question to you.
Well, going all the way back, I mean, you're looking at it from all the way back in basic red box, white box, all the other stuff. And dwarves just weren't as, I don't use the word interesting, but they weren't as powerful. If you picked an elf, you were a magic user and a fighter at level 1 straight away, no problem whatsoever. If you picked a dwarf, you were a dwarf. Wonderful. All the joy and can't climb so well. Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, what bonus do I get there? None. And then you look at it as it was going on and on, and it's like, there's no real bonus to this. You're short, you're bad-tempered. It's such a stereotype.
Yes.
But it's exactly how they're still looking at it from this. And obviously there's been a variety of things that have gone on in recent times, and attitudes are starting to change. Peter Dinklage and his comment towards Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and why are we still perpetrating these myths? And I have to say, looking at this, you're looking at it going, well, yeah, that's still being perpetrated. You've still got, what are they? They're insular. They like being inside. They don't like other races. They don't go anywhere else. They like doing whatever they're doing, which actually, when you think about it, is not that different from the elves. But the difference behind it being is that the elves are pretty.
Yes.
The elves are pretty.
Yeah.
The dwarves are not. And it's that whole, well, we're still shut in, we're still doing this, we're still doing this. And then the Duergar, which we will definitely come on to later on because, well, there is going to cause a bone of contention now, isn't it? Because, lawful evil? Really? Really?
Yeah, it's very interesting because again, it's been, like I said, it's been a little while since I've read Mordenkainen's. I think over a year or so. I think we looked at the Githyanki and the Githzari and the Blood Dwarves, certainly very early episodes of D&D Book Club, and then to come back to it to read this chapter and to read the Elves chapter for a later episode. I kind of was like, ooh, I don't like how it's been written. The tone of it seems really off. And as we just discussed off the recording, this book came out in 2018. So at time of recording 4 years ago. And it's one of those things where if it was released now, I think there'd be a lot of backlash against it.
Like, some arguments.
It just feels like the way it's written, and I know with Mordenkainen's and the same with like Tasha's and Vola's, there's obviously that the voice throughout. Some of the stuff that Mordenkainen says, and I'm sure he said this in the other chapter as well, it feels very judgmental and unnecessarily like it's like a comment, and I'm just like, actually, I don't need that comment. I don't need you to comment on how you see this person's race as. And I did feel a bit uncomfortable, certainly towards the end with the comments on the Duergar. I was like,
and you've grouped an entire race in amongst your perspective.
Yeah,
and it is just a perspective. It's not a truth. It's a perspective.
Definitely.
But you've grouped everything about them in that thing. Now, fair enough. It makes them, from a purely meta point of view, absolutely no problem at all. If everything that Mordenkainen says is correct about them, they are in fact vicious psychos who enjoy killing things. Okay. But are they?
Yeah.
Are they really? Because you read the whole chapter and there's that thing of, I'm not sure they are actually.
Yeah. No.
I can see the references to the use of slaves, the reference to the use of everything else. But then you've got the wonder, it's one clan.
Yes.
It's not a separate race.
No.
It's one clan against every other dwarf in creation. And every other dwarf hates them.
Let's talk about the quick history of it then. Essentially, and again, this is me comparing it to the elves, whereas the elves, they're sort of the split of their races sort of happened before they came into the material plane. For the dwarves, it happened on the material plane. This idea that, dwarves they sort of serve their deity Moradin, who's always about perfection, progress, striving, crafting, all good stuff. And I quite like that appeal of it. And it does say later on that idea that dwarven religion is at the heart of everything they do. And I quite like that, actually seeing that and the different sort of deities that are sort of written down there. But then it talks about the Duergar clan who suddenly gained this sort of obsession to keep digging, to keep finding, because they're just like one hit away from finding the treasure and stuff like that. And to a very brutal campaign of them just constantly digging down, where the slightly weaker members of the clan die to the point where they just are pushed out of the way so they can keep going and going and going. And again, great imagery, I think, from that. Like an interesting story. And then when they break through, they finally get to where they believe that's where their goal is, to find out that all this time they've been controlled by a huge elder brain and all this illithids underneath there who've sent out this lure to capture the greed that's in every dwarf. And from there, enslave the rest of this clan, and then to do experiments on them and to change them into what they are now. And then to have a hero come up from them to ask Admodius, of all people, to come and help them out. Like, again, a great story in itself, a really interesting sort of thing, to overcome the mind flayers and then to get back to the service, only to discover the rest of the dwarves have sort of denounced them, that they, as you sort of put it to me off podcast, that, they didn't keep the temples clean or in good order. So you're heretics. You
didn't keep worshipping Moradin, therefore you must be evil, and therefore we must wipe you out. The fact that you were controlled by lithids to go down, one word, Moria, well, there weren't anything down there, but somehow those dwarves aren't evil.
Yeah.
So there wasn't anything mind-controlling down there, and yet they're not evil. And then they have the strength to break away from the illithids. I mean, for God's sake, that's not a small undertaking.
No, not at all.
But they've managed to do that. They broke away. They come back up. They should be the absolute pride of the dwarven nation because they've done that. And yet, your church is messy.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we annoyed? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're annoyed.
To the point where it gets that thing with the hero, and I know I'm going to say their name wrong, the Laduguer.
Laduguer.
Who then swears that they will take Moradin's place as well. And again, a very cool image of that, like that sort of like, and again, the way that character is described in the story with Asmodeus about coming over the three trials as a stoic, unflinching things, and that's where you get the three principles of the Duergar stuff. Great. I think those parts of this chapter were really well written, and like for me, very evocative of like what a great story, and that's why the dwarves are as they are. But I completely agree. It does feel a bit like, as it then goes on to describe the Duergar in a lot of detail, you get that sense that there is a definite sort of bias saying like, well, they're clearly evil because of this stuff. And you think to yourself, well, actually, as you already said, come on. Like,
well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the thought for me was immediately, are the dwarves the arseholes? I mean, literally.
I would say yes.
ADTA. You know what I mean? It's like, actually, yes, they appear to be. And there's this one clan that's still doing things, and okay, they've abandoned dwarfish pursuits. Okay, well, all right. And that, for those followers of Moradin, is enough to cast them down because they're no longer following what they should be doing. So they're not obeying rigid doctrine, and for that we must cast them down. Really? Well, let's have a look. Do we have any other parallels in the real world about that one? I think we might. I mean, I like the bit that they went through all the other dwarves within the different realms.
Yes.
But once again, it did the whole, I mean, you've got the hill dwarves who go outside. You've got the mountain dwarves who stay inside.
Yes.
You've got the gold dwarves who stay inside. You've got the shield dwarves who go outside. I'm spotting a pattern emerging here. Yeah. It's just something where you're literally boxing them up. And I appreciate they like to stay underground, no problem at all.
Yeah.
I get the idea of that, no problem. But it's like they're not, for all that they're supposed to be good.
Yes.
I'm talking about regular dwarves now rather than the Duergar, but at the same time, what do? Well, they stay inside and obsess about crafting things. That's what they do. That's all they do. How is that so very different?
Yeah. It's incredibly similar. I guess it's that the way it would be justified in quotation marks is like, well, the Duergar take it to the extreme in the sense of that, it's never enough. It's never one thing. And there's definitely a little later on, it talks about them preferring quantity over quality.
Quality, yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's that sort of thing going, it's such a slight thing, and maybe that is a good thing about villains and that sort of thing, that they started good and then got to evil. But yeah, I definitely feel they got a bit of a raw deal in this history. So and it's one of those things where again, if players wanted to play Duergar, I would definitely pull them aside to feel like, just so you know about this history, but let's work the narrative so that not every dwarf you meet, you want to kill them and they want to kill you. We'll rewrite that narrative completely. But this has happened to you. There is a generational trauma. Like it talks about, I'm sure you read this. So this idea of drinking ale.
Drinking too much.
Yeah. All right. And I didn't know this, but with dwarves, when they drink to celebrate rather than to forget. So this idea that when they drink, they will remember memories of past, of great achievements and sorrows. And it's like it's almost like a social thing in a way.
It's a racial memory, isn't it? That's the whole.
Yeah. But whereas, and they will do it to excess, whereas the Duergar will drink, but not to excess, because then they will wake up with what sounds like awful hangovers of remembering their previous ancestors being tortured. And I'm like,
their racial memory. Which,
whoa.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that's one of the things I noted down here, just that whole awakening racial memories of slavery. And it's like, ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know something? You can see where a dwarf trying to make friends with a Duergar and goes, let's have a drink. And the Duergar goes, really? Really? You want to have a drink? And there's that whole massive, you've switched it completely. And there's that moment where the dwarf goes, no, but this is a good thing. I'm here. We're going to celebrate. We're going to have some drink. It's good. No problem at all. And the Duergar's like, really? You're inviting me to remember all the things that happened to me.
Yes.
And my people. Are you now?
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. How about I have an axe? Let's have a fight instead.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's, just... And I like the idea that they somehow managed to overwrite in that way. It goes so deep, what was done to them, that it replaced the good memories of that. And you have to wonder, given that gods are existing, gods are present, how come Moradin hasn't just stepped in and gone, you know something, wouldn't that be a thing if I gave you back the good memories?
Yeah.
If I just gave you back all the things that made you who we are, would you not suddenly go, you know something, I can get drunk and it's all good memories? As opposed to, you know something, it's shit.
Yeah.
It's really shit. And you know something, if you get drunk, you're going to remember more shit. You know, you can never again go drinking because your hangover is going to be the worst thing you've ever had in your life. And, you know, and no care for crafting. I mean, you know, yeah, fair enough. I get that. With the dwarves, no problem at all. You can spend 50 years making a device and it's a glorious thing and it's a masterwork and all sorts of other stuff. But then you've got on the other side the whole, yeah, but I made this in 2 hours and it works.
Yes.
So, yeah, no problem at all. This makes the dwarves the Gucci of the world. Which, you know, fair enough, maybe I shouldn't choose Gucci on account of what they've been doing recently. But at the same time, there's that moment of the dwarves are Gucci.
Yeah.
And the Duergar are all the cheap knockoffs.
Yeah. Pretty
much.
the
cheap knockoffs are still fairly good at what they do. There just happen to be more of them. And they have to do more of them because there's far less of them than there is of every other dwarf clan. So, of course, they're going to make things at far faster, far higher. You know, just... But
that's an interesting point. Again, I'm going to talk about that deity, and I'm going to get this name wrong, the Abathor?
Abathor.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. Yes, that one. So this is one of the deities that's seen. There's like 4 main deities that's seen in the dwarven households, and this is one of them, which is a neutral evil god that's all about that greed stuff. But the reason this person is sort of kept in this area, because it uses that idea of like the shortcuts, a little bit of trickery, that sort of thing, and it comes into play when dwarves are selling their wares, perhaps to outsiders, and they're like, "Oh, this isn't my finest work, but I'm going to sell it for a high price anyway, because these idiots don't know any difference." But then to say the humanoids or to the elves or whoever they're selling it to, they're sort of like, wow, this is possibly the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, best thing I've ever seen. Which...
And they're like, I'm going to pay for what I think it's worth. And they had this great, I can't find it, but it talked about this idea of like a dwarf might be like, oh, this is just a bog standard thing, whereas a farmer would see it as a thing for life.
Yeah, as a masterwork. Yeah,
exactly. And I just think that's such an interesting way of looking at it. Because we've dealt with dwarves in our campaigns and stuff like that. And they are master smiths. They are, they're artisans, and they're, again, that idea of crafting to perfection. But if something's not perfect, they're like, well, I'm just going to sell it for a high price anyway. And they won't know the difference. And like, you're right, they don't know the difference, but they're still going to get their money's worth. So.
Yeah. Which, again, I don't see as being evil. I don't see.
I think that's crafty, right? That's like,
yeah, that's sensible. You got the whole.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not going to use this, but it's better than anything you've got.
Yeah.
So I can sell it for more than anything you paid, and you'll still buy it. And actually, it's not a bad deal I'm giving you here. This is the best thing you're ever going to get. Fair enough. I'm charging you for it, but you couldn't afford a masterwork.
Yeah.
So I give you this thing that I made. It's not the best thing I've ever made, but something is better than your stuff.
Yeah.
Which, absolutely. I mean, it's an elitist attitude, and fair enough, no problem at all. But it's like everything else. I mean, we're back to, going back to Pratchett briefly, we're back to Fine's theory of socio-economical fairness. No problem at all. The 50 quid pair of boots will last you forever. No problem whatsoever. Whereas the tenner will wear out after 6 months, and you'll have to buy 5 more sets at least. And then 5 more sets, but the 50 quid boots will still be working at that point. So because you've spent more money on the one thing, yeah, it's an unfairness, but it's not necessarily evil. It's just which. Yeah, again,
we've talked about this certainly before in DM's book club. This idea of evil being absolute when it's not. It's all subjective, really, isn't it? And it's like, yeah, like I totally agree with that idea. Like pay what you're worth, even if you don't think it's the best. It's not, you're not lying to these people, because obviously you'll have, I don't know, the axe on there going, this is my axe, it's one of the best I've made. It's not the best. And then you see like 3 more, on the shelf behind it as they're being cooled or whatever. It's like, of course, then you're not going to buy the one item and then no one else has it in the game. Like that's just silly.
Just silly. And the other thing is they only have for change. So everything else about dwarves is nothing changes.
Yes.
Which then brings the question, was the Duergar's sin not that they did all these things, but that they chose to change? Is that the sin for which they're being punished? They dared to take their own path. Is that why everyone else hates them? I mean, we're back to religious psychos here, but
But it's true. 'Cause again, looking at it, again, it talks about this, the obsessive pursuit of perfection. They value stability, repetition and tradition above everything else. And dwarves would see that chaos and change causes distractions from what they are at hand. But as a result, that means they're going to use the same defense tactics all the time in their stronghold because it worked before. Why would we change now? Why would we need to adapt? And that sort of thing. So it is true. This idea of having a god that is talking about being adaptive and change is so alien to these dwarves. And yet those ones that do that, they're sort of frowned upon or maybe cast out as exiles per se, because they don't necessarily fit into this clan ideals and stuff like that. Yeah, I completely see that. And I think it was interesting as well. It then talks about like their relationships with humans and elves and other races outside their own. It gave the example of like, there's a trades embassy that goes to a human city. They come every 30 years, but as soon as they're there, the people they dealt with, they're no longer around. So they have to redo everything all over again. And it's like, I mean, I get that social anxiety all the time when I'm going out, but I expect that, whereas dwarves don't necessarily expect it. Like, well, what do you mean we have to talk to somebody else? We've already did this like ages ago. And it's like,
we did it years ago. Here's the contract.
Yeah. And you're like, that's great. But that was 30 years ago. I wasn't around then, that sort of thing.
And I think that's the other thing, isn't it? It's at some point, the dwarves are bound and obliged to fail because all it takes is that someone goes, all right, so you're a clan of dwarves, you've been following this, you follow this god, no problem at all. You're in here, which means that there's 2 walls there, there's something behind it, you've got a pit trap lock behind that one. On the side there, you've got some arrow points. On the bottom end of that one, there's going to be some acid. So all we have to do to get through all that is... And, the dwarves on the other side are going, but this worked for my forefather. It's like, yeah, it did. Dude, a brief word. I suspect your plan may have a little tiny hole in it. Which hole is that then? Where's the hole the artillery is about to drop into? Because, they figured out that, something vulnerable.
I do love that idea of having like a heist based in a dwarven's stronghold now, because it goes into a lot of detail about their strongholds and stuff like that, and how the best treasure is obviously kept in, and this idea like the more precious sort of inner chambers of it are going to be decorated and beautiful, whereas the outer ones, because that's what the defenses are, they're not going to look any prettier or anything like this. Like, it's a good job, but I mean, to us they'll look amazing, but they're like, no, it's just fine. The real stuff's in here, but you won't get in it because we don't trust you yet. Even those outsiders don't get too much of a look in, so you'll never really see it. But I love that idea that if you manage to get like a plan or something of that stronghold, you're like, right, it's here. How are we going to break in? Yeah,
how are we going to get into it? Yeah. Ocean's 9. No. But yeah, I mean, and I like the idea that the enemy's all around part of it. The bit where they're actually talking about the different things that would want a dwarven stronghold.
Yes.
And the answer came back, actually not too many of them.
Yeah. I actually found that quite shocking, because it lists out obviously all the dragons, because obviously like dragons like hordes, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, all these dragons unlikely to meet a thing unless they're close by. And I was like, surely, like, because we have done an episode of dragon, I think surely if they're greedy enough and they know there is a horde nearby, you'd go and attack it anyway, or you get minions and you go and make that your home, no matter what metallic dragon you are. There's a chromatic dragon, sorry, you are. Like, I just was like, I mean, it's treasure. They like treasure. Like, it's a big defining feature. They're gonna, they know there's a big treasure. They're gonna get it. They're gonna try and attack it, or team up together or something. So, yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? It loses something of it. I mean, it says given the orcs' propensity to rely on brute force, they can only come severely weakened dwarf strongholds. I'm like, really? Orcs aren't dumb.
Yeah, orcs are not dumb at all.
So all they have to do is go, okay, well, let's have a think. What do we do? Well, these are dwarves. They're not Duergar. Let's get them drunk. And then let's get them talking about stuff. And then let's remember that.
Yeah.
At it. It's like, Yeah. And I love the idea that, the giants were an enemy. And I'm like, at what point is a giant going to want to sit in a very cramped basement?
No.
Which is what it ostensibly is, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, I think, like, certainly, like, from, again, brief game experience, like I can imagine the fire giants going, I like all these dwarves, but they're coming with me to the volcano. And I'm going to make them work in the forges. It's more them taking them out. But even then, like I said, they won't launch direct attacks on it unless it's extremely circumstances, which makes sense because their size is a great disadvantage.
You're literally crawling in. It turns into a game of Space Hulk. You're suddenly walking around waiting for the dwarfs to swarm all over you, which you're good. Very Gulliver's
Travels, isn't it?
But then it makes you ask the question. I mean, you look at classic Lord of the Rings. Smaug sitting underground, and don't get me wrong, the films when they did the depiction of those halls and everything else, and they're these immense, great, massive open spaces, and I'm like, why? Why would dwarves build that like that? They don't want somewhere where there's a 1,000-meter view. No,
not really.
They like their small areas and their nice little secure bits and everything else. This has got a thing where a worm's, it's quite literally wandering around stuff. And they just happen to have left a cast of gold. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's in the quiet words of the bard, what the hell was that? We just happen to leave this gold thing here that if you melt all the gold, it pours down and makes a gold jelly. No, behave. Have a word.
Have a word. Just go back to that point as well, because you're talking about traps briefly there. It had an interesting a very small paragraph saying that there's sort of traps or defenses in a stronghold. They won't be stuff necessarily like a pit trap or anything like, just in case it'll hurt the clan members, which is very interesting because obviously a lot of the dungeons I've certainly played in have acid traps or these sort of traps. So it's because then I guess, so if you were in a dwarven stronghold, then you would have to obviously say okay, there's definitely other ways that stops attackers coming in if they do get in, that's the thing. But I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't necessarily considered that. They're like, oh yeah, we don't put these in here just in case there's some bloody idiot that comes in. It's like, oh, Derek's in the pit again.
And that's the thing though, because for me it doesn't make sense if a dungeon is built. I use the word dungeon, stronghold, whatever.
Yeah.
But you recall the thing that we played in Pantheon, and you went down, the kobolds were there.
Yes.
But every bit in there had an off switch.
Yeah.
Every single thing had an off switch that if you knew what it was, you could go straight through it, no problem whatsoever. From the weighted box on one of them that makes sure the thing doesn't drop, to the illusion of Tiamat and a variety of other stuff. And it's like, I'm not going in there. And then someone goes, is it the exact same thing every time? And someone goes, yeah. Do we think it's real? Probably not. But if you know, you just walk straight in. No problem at all. Is that brief minute? Yep. I'm going to be deaf for a second, but it'll be fine. No worries.
It's like, you're on the phone. You go, oh, give me 1 second. I'm about to go through the Tiamat tunnel.
The Tiamat tunnel. There we go. No problem. What's the worst that could happen? But if you knew that, and these are dwarves, perfection. So why not? Because you know where the traps are. You helped engineer them. You've got a good memory. This is what dwarves do. Why wouldn't you have all these traps? Why wouldn't they be the sort of trap that Heath Robinson would be proud of? Only the penitent man kneels before God. Yeah, guess what? No dwarf did that one. They'd have just gone, no problem at all. What's this? Well, it looked like a blender. Oh, right. It's not going to affect you if you're a dwarf. Why? Because you're small. No problem at all. Comes in at head height. Yeah, but not their head height. No problem at all. They just walk straight through going, what's the worst that could happen? Don't wear a high hat.
Yeah. Don't wear your best hat or your best fascinator just in case.
Yeah. No plumes on your head, son. That's like, no. Yeah. And then that's the thing. I mean, they talk about the use of magic and everything else.
Yeah, this is an interesting
Using magic to assist in the creation of things is anathema. Really, is it? It amounts to nothing more than cheating. Did you have to learn the magic? Yes, you did.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. This idea is like, well, if you gain it from one of the dwarven gods, or, as a cleric or something like that, then that's okay. But anything else is frowned upon because it's not within the pantheon. And again, it comes back to that whole sort of, religion being a very strong part of
religious
the clan.
fanatics.
And it's just, it's interesting because then, if you were going to have, say, a sorcerer or, a warlock or anything like that, it would be, again, maybe it's something I would say, like, because again, going back to the whole thing of like the clan is the most important thing. But when they're adventuring, there's two things, certainly for dwarves, is like either they they don't fit in, so they're going to go out by themselves, or they've been sent on a special mission via one of the temples or something like to do something for the clan, with the aim to come back at some point. So I can easily see if you wanted to be real spellcasters and you wanted to fit into this lore per se, you're like, okay, well, you don't fit in well with the clan, and that's just that. So that's the thing. I'm just like, that's such a shame, because you'd think with smithing and perfections, it doesn't matter how you get there. Surely you'd want every bit of help to make sure you get there. But
you made the perfect thing, but you see, that may be more of a gnomish perspective rather than dwarvish perspective.
Definitely.
And the dwarf sitting there going, no, I must use these hammers. And it's like, okay, except the humans over there are making ballistas that throw balls of, sun at you. And that wizard over there, the 18th level one? Yeah, that one. Yeah, don't go near that. Why? Because it will kill you. Why? Because you haven't figured out what magic is yet. It has no such compunction. It just goes, yeah, fine, no problem at all. What have I got here? Power word, bugger up the dwarves. What luck.
Yeah. But going then back into the clan stuff then. So I did find this sort of a bit interesting, where every clan calls upon its members to have sort of 3 principal roles to fill out. Yes. First one being an occupation that sustains in the community itself. So, like food wise. Yeah, exactly. Because I think it makes clear that not everyone can be a master artisan or a vigilant warrior. You need a whole range of talents. So I quite like that, the fact that you could easily, you don't have to be the brave warrior or the person that's like the trader sort of thing. You could literally be this person that's, for whatever reason, exiled or is out on an adventure because you've been sent to it. The second role, as I said, was like occupations that involve crafting items or other forms of creation, so smelting, smithing, gem cutting, etc. And then the third one is, I quite like the title of this, or the way it's sort of phrased. It says, be performed by those who navigate the space between the clan and the chaotic creatures of the outside world. So, envoys, merchants, something. And the real thing I really liked about it, because then it goes into like the leadership and government stuff a bit. And obviously this idea that each clan has a king or a queen from a noble family who is believed or has a claim to be descended from one of the first dwarves. But the idea that every sort of young noble then has to spend time with each master of a profession of the clan. So they have that sort of, they have the knowledge of doing that, but also to assess what their temperament is as a thing. And I just thought that was quite a cool little thing, because that
it's a nice idea, and it fits in with the traditions and everything else, which
exactly,
again, it all forms to the whole your path is chosen. Your path will be chosen. You will not deviate from this. You will never be anything else. Which, of course, begs the question, are all adventurers outcasts?
Yeah, it's true. I would, again, because it gives you that option to be like, well, you could be sent as a, from one of the temples or from like a god thing. But I agree. I would assume from the way it's read, if you're a warrior of some sort and you're not with your dwarven clan, you must have left for some reason. And there
must be something bad. And if you're an envoy or a merchant or something similar, great, no problem at all. But as soon as your job's done, you've got to go back.
Yeah, exactly. So why would you continue on your adventure with your party? So
and it's not like you're going to turn around and say, well, it took me 20 years to go get that bread.
You're not Jean Valjean.
Do you know what I mean? Don't think you did, son. But no, really. I was out getting bread for 20 years. Yeah. Yeah, no, I came back with some mithril. Yeah, well, what about that? I found some of that on the way back. Yeah. And these scars, I was cooking bread and then, just
carried on. But I do think that's quite interesting because, like role-playing that aspect of it. And I know, again, it is, we can go into like Duergar adventures as well, but this, or Dwarven adventures as well. It's just, again, because this is something that if I was role-playing a dwarf or playing a dwarven character before reading this, I would not even, I know vaguely that the clans were very important stuff, but the idea is like, you have to go back at some point. Like that seems so alien to me as a player, because I'm like, well, this is my family now. I'm with them. I'm doing stuff with them. I don't need, unless something drastic is happening back at home, why would I ever go back? So it's an interesting one.
You can never go home was the comment. I mean, it's something that was told to me many years ago. He said, said you can return to the house, but you can never go home because as soon as you've left, it changes. And that's true. That's so very true. But for dwarves, you can never leave home, which I can imagine not worse. So you're never going to make new plans. You're never going to do anything else. Everything is about continuing the status quo. Sooner or later, that's a dead race waiting to happen. Someone will do something bad. And because you're so stuck in your ways, you won't see what's been done. And
Yeah, it's just ways to think about it, I guess. It's that sort of just keeping it in mind. And that's why, again, the whole point of Dean's book club is like, oh, there's all these interesting things. Like I wouldn't have known about it before. But now if I had a player who's really keen, I was like, let's talk more about that history. And like, do you feel strongly with your clan? Like maybe you go back fairly often. Like it talks about like this idea when dwarves volunteer for a life outside of the world, whether they take up like true adventuring or pursue like a mundane occupation, they remain members of the clan, and they always include some responsibility to the clan. So whether there's reporting back, even if you're a blacksmith in just the local village, it's about, that you always have that connection. And I think from when we've played role-playing games, certainly video role-playing games, there's always that I'm an orphan, I don't have connections to blah 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 blah. So I think here definitely a nice backstory of like clan stuff would be very key for this.
Yeah, it would be an interesting one. And again, we're back to Lord of the Rings rather than D&D, but at the same time, you've got the whole all the dwarves went to Moradin. No problem. But first of all, they were with a hobbit and did a variety of other things in order to find what they wanted to find and do the other things and everything else. And it's like, well, okay. But you must have had a reason for that. Now, in this, it would have been you were outcast because of someone destroyed your home.
Yes.
That's why you're going back to retake it. Fine, no problem at all. But we're back to the whole, but you're going back to retake it. You haven't moved on and gone, you know something, there's a mountain over there that doesn't have a dragon sitting in it.
Yeah, let's go for that one.
Well, look, let's have that. There's millions of us. Can we tunnel? Yeah, we can tunnel.
Yeah.
Can we build? Yeah, we can build.
Yeah, we're great at it.
Can we build this gigantic catapult that can shoot a rock onto the dragon's head? We probably can. Let's try that. That's a good idea. It's like, it's like crossbows and catapults. You've got one dwarf mountain over here, one dwarf mountain over here, and this one's lining up this gigantic crossbow. So every time the dragon sticks his head out and yawns, it's like, gotcha.
Got it. Yeah.
Great. So let me get this straight, guys. We've killed the dragon. It's now a 3,000-mile walk. Okay. All right. Are we all small? Yeah, we're all small. Is it going to feel like a 6,000-mile walk? It is going to feel like a 6,000-mile walk.
None of us have the arcane ability to move us there any closer.
And we can't use magic. We can't even fleet-foot it. No. Did we build some airships? We must have built some airships. No. Why would we need airships underground? Shit. Exactly. No one built airships? I know.
I love that idea. It's just like the king or queen of the clan is just like, the mum that's on the wall. Come on, we're going to go for a hike. You're going to love it. And we're all like, Mom! Just like around the lake. Why
are we living in mountains? Because then we can get our steps in every day.
That's pretty. Yeah, they all have time. There's pedometers on them. Why not pedometers? Yes, I love that. Well, let's go. As we've looked at dwarves quite quickly, let's look at Duergar now. So yes, we've kind of mentioned it briefly. This idea of them having sort of free rules of conduct. Where all of their psychology, culture, and society are based around these three things. So the first one is our pockets are never full, our fight is never done, and our resolve is never shaken.
Which I loved.
Yes.
I love that third one in particular. I love the whole our resolve is never shaken.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you do, we ain't going to change from the path that we're on. Which makes them innately dwarvish.
Yes, 1,000%.
Yeah, our pockets are never full. The greed for greater things, innately dwarvish. Our fight is never done, innately dwarvish. Those three things are exactly the tenets of the rest of the dwarves.
Yeah.
They're just voiced differently.
Yes, agreed.
Which, I'm back to the whole, how are these the bad guys? What's wrong with this picture? I mean, it's fair enough. I mean, they've got several quotes in here about the various different things where people have said things like, work or die. In the first case, you are useful. In the second, you are entertaining. Well, okay. Yep, fine. All right. So you've got one person who's evil. Fine. No problem at all. Our God sprang from among us. They endured our hardships and carved a path to our salvation. What has your God done for you? And the answer is not very bloody much, last time I checked.
Definitely not.
And you look at these things, that the mind is but another material set before it to shape into a weapon.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. No problem at all. These things aren't bad.
No. Yeah, in any of the light, it would be seen as like not an idealistic, but like definitely something to strive towards. And
determined.
Yeah, I can definitely see our fight is never done, our resolve is never taken, as posters, you know. Our pockets are never full. I guess that's on some Financial Times website. I don't know, but those circuit, I can imagine them banners and stuff like that, and people chanting them it's very cool.
Well, just boiler rooms filled with Duergar all yelling for shares.
Yeah.
Don't mess with a share dealer if it's a Duergar. Mm-hmm. Why? Because something. They're going to win.
They're gonna take you for the cleaners and then some more. And let's quickly then talk about the deities as well. So obviously there's quite a few deities in the dwarven one, and then here there's only two. For the Duergar. Yeah. Which is, I guess, I don't know, makes sense in a way. I guess because obviously there's 20 or so in the proper big pantheon with Moradin, and then here you've got obviously the hero. I'm going to say his name wrong again. Laduguer, and then Deep Dura. Which I quite like that because both of them obviously have a very pinnacle role in that history of the Duergar. So the Deep Dura, she stole the power of the psionics from the Mind Flayers and gifted it to her people. Yep. So again, almost that idea that they are heroes from within the clan themselves who are then become almost on a godlike deity.
I like that idea though. I like the idea that they've eschewed the idea of deities because their comment was, we needed God. Mm-hmm. Where was he?
Yeah.
We needed him. Mm-hmm. Look at all the stuff we had here. There's a saying, I don't know if it's from the Bible or not, but what God tests their chosen in hell? And this is that. Mm-hmm. So what do? They worship the people who were gods to them, but they were just people.
Yeah.
And as it says there, that they honor their deity by acquiring more wealth and power. They don't worship them in the traditional sense.
Yes.
No temples, no formal services, no nothing else. What they do is they live a life dedicated to the principles of that deity, of that person who meant so very much. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to draw real world comparisons, but Jesus, anybody?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's that moment of, no problem at all. Several thousand years later, here we are, still worshipping them because, something, what they did made that much of a difference. Now, I'm not religious.
No.
But I can see the parallel to that.
100%.
Strongly mirrored.
Yeah.
And there's that whole, the priests of Dura, they honor their deity by planning equipment and launching holy crusades against their enemies. Well, that doesn't sound at all like any religion I know, really.
Ooh.
But at the same time, there's that whole, but we do what our God would have us do. Mm-hmm. We don't wait for the help of our God because we know it's not coming.
Yeah. Well, I like that.
But as a result, we're stronger because we're not waiting for God to say, right, have it. I've part of the sea. It's all good. Off you go. Mm-hmm. We're not doing that. We get in the boat and start paddling. Yeah. We ain't got a boat, no problem. We start swimming. You know what I mean? Are we wearing armor? Yeah, right. Tie on a rope. We'll drag it across afterwards. Done. No problem at all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to wait for God to do something.
No.
Because we know he's not coming.
So, yeah. That's such a different mindset to what the dwarves are doing as well. And they talk about it being the dark reflection of the, and I just think, it makes so much sense that they just these are just normal people. We do it. We don't do anything special as a result of that. It's just,
And that's the thing. I mean, they talk about the whole, humanoid captives providing unskilled labor. Well, I'm going to go back to religion for a second and say, that's never happened, really. It's like, okay. So, in recent decades, they've started to move away from the practice of slavery. They've started building mechanical servitors, which we'll come to in a short while. But at the same time, mechanical servitors, right? Okay, so, I don't know, like cars and stuff, which, we use those.
Yeah, drones in general. All these things.
Just all these things.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you're sensitive to sunlight. Why?
Yeah.
Most of these dwarves spend all their entire lives underground. Mm-hmm. Why aren't they sensitive to sunlight? Mountain dwarves never come out. Why aren't they sensitive to sunlight?
Yeah.
It's almost as if their god cursed them.
Pretty much, I assume so. And again, I haven't checked the latest Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse or anything. I don't know whether they have removed that.
I'm waiting for that. That's going to be interesting.
Because I assume they will do, because they've done that for other things like the kobolds and stuff like that, and presumably for Drow.
I wonder, because that'll be interesting to see how it was to how it is. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it'll be, I don't know, it's interesting when they do all the other bits and the psionic awakenings of these things, the fact that they use psionics.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. So it talks about that idea that they're born with some sort of psionic talent, which they can turn invisible. and they can also.
I love the idea of that. Dwarves are cloaking devices. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
I mean, seriously.
I've definitely
the Klingons of the D&D, aren't they? That's what they are.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see that. And I think I remember again one of our early games for my Monday game. We were in the Underdark, and then we could see a dwarf being taken up, and they were telling us to go away. And we're like, "What are you talking about?" And then we realized they're surrounded by invisible Duergar who were just coming after us, like, and we couldn't see them because we were like, "What's going on?" So, and it was terrifying. We had like 6 of them on us.
But it begs the question: invisibility. Well, you live underground. It's dark. Who thought you needed invisibility? Surely the better thing would be to have, I don't know, the ability to see absolutely everything.
Yeah, like proper, like full-on dark vision.
Omnivision, yeah. You'd see everything as if it was bright daylight, no problem at all. Which then explains why you don't want to go outside, no problem at all.
Yeah, because you'll be
go outside and suddenly blind,
It did talk about those who delved into psionic research, the process of accessing a dimensional space which they can tap into the energy to this energy. And then it gives other examples, which obviously doesn't come with the actual sort of stat block per se, but this idea that they could alter their bodies and those other creatures tap into thoughts, bend them to as they see fit, and impart a spark of locomotion and even basic intelligence into objects. So coming through to that, so the idea of making those sort of constructs and that sort of thing, but the idea that they could bend and almost modify memory is something that I was like, again, very Mind Flayer-esque on that as well. But I just thought, that's what I would add if I was having like the meeting a clan and there is they're captured in some way, but there is like some sort of not even like a arcanist or anything like that, but just somebody who can do that, who can delve in and find those memories and stuff and pluck them out and then they just have them.
You see, that's the thing, because for me, the only way I saw this of them being in any way evil is what if, just what if. Are you familiar with Migu from Call of Cthulhu?
Yes.
So they replace brains. So you've got plant-based creatures running around in the bodies of other things. What if the Duergar never did make it out?
Oh, shoot.
What if the experiments were actually to transplant illithids into the bodies of dwarves? What if all the psionic energies and everything else and all the other stuff, what if the racial memory is still correct, but the racial memory is of the illithids?
Whoa.
What if these were convinced that they were dwarves at one point? What if they were convinced that Laduguer he got them out, he saved them?
Whoa.
And they have that moment where they have this heroic history, they have this narrative, and they have this hate because the dwarves hated them for what they'd become. But actually, what had actually happened was the dwarves had gone, "You're not dwarves, you're illithids." Then, that makes sense.
That's such a cool concept. I love that idea.
That's the only way I could see this whole they're evil narrative working. Yes. And if they'd made any reference to the fact that they're still illithids, I'd have got it. This whole thing goes away. No problem at all. They're evil, it's cool. I'm down with that. No problem at all. But as it is, there's that whole... And if that's what they've done with the new stuff, something great, fantastic. I'd love to see that. No problem at all. But
definitely.
With this, is that whole thing of you haven't given me enough for them to be evil. You haven't given me enough to tell them with certainty you are everything that was bad. You are the bad thing. Right now, they're the victims.
Yeah, 100%.
If they were illithid, running around with illithid brains inside dwarf bodies, I can see where that works. No problem at all. But that's the only way I can see it working. And, I'm not quite willing to bash them on the whole, you must be evil because you got caught by illithids. Well, so that's every player character in the universe ever encountered the bleeders, hasn't it? I mean, you go back and you suddenly think, well, you were near the illithids, surely you're bad now. It's like, really?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, it's a curious thing. It's a thought behind it. And you look at the bits and pieces that it's got, and it's got nothing really about how you could play Duergar.
Gives you like the quirks and maybe a reason why you might want to be out there. But compared to other... Certainly the readings I've done, like in Volo's recently, we've done an episode on Beholders, and there's a whole bit about like how do you role play a Beholder, and obviously with Fedspans that's come out, how do you role play these dragons and stuff like that. But for Duergar, there isn't much in it. Like again, in the tables at the end, you've got the idea of what clans, like clan status, like what their sort of like individual trait, like maybe what they're obsessing over or what their sort of main deal is, and then like why you might be out in the world, and then a couple of, if you're going to have some, I don't know, a dwarvish envoy, like what people would be in there and stuff. But you're right, there doesn't seem to be much in terms of like how would you play this sensibly, not even sensibly. I don't know what the word would be, but appropriately. I don't know.
In any way, capably. I mean,
yes, capably is the word I'm kind of.
It's. I mean, I look at the. I mean, there's the monster manual at the back of it with all the different examples of what they are and everything else. Which, and I'm looking at these things and Duergar Despot. Well, it's a cyborg. Simple as you've replaced a few bits with other bits. Okay, well, that's fine, but that doesn't sound like something that a sensible dwarf would be getting up to. And you've got Duergar hammers, which, again, interesting concept, but it's a dreadnought. It's quite literally, it's something inside a dreadnought powered by pain. Well, why would you want to be powered by pain? Why can't you just engineer something that works properly? And, you've got the cavalry. And the curious thing here, which I'm entirely not sure where this goes, but when the Duergar hits a target with a melee attack while mounted on a female steeder, the steeder can make one melee attack against the same target as a reaction. Really? Well, what if it's riding a bloke? What's the difference?
No difference.
The mind master with the mind mastery and everything else, and you can change things and mind poison damage and all sorts of other stuff, and constructs that scream things and liquefy rock and all sorts of other stuff. But again, the Duergar are accused of spreading gossip, are trapped within one of these devices, their heads, beards shorn, and their ongoing agony channeled into psionic energy that powers the screamer. Well, okay, does that mean they woke up and they realized that they don't want to be Illithids anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, is that what it is? Are they still under the Illithids' control? I mean, none of it makes any sense. You create Soulblade. I mean, I love this concept. What have you got? It's a dwarven Jedi. That's what that is.
Yes.
Oh, wait, sorry, Sith. My bad. Wait, only a Sith deals in absolutes. That means the dwarves are the Sith. Ha! There we go.
You've done it.
Get around that one, people. And everyone can have invisibility and enlarge, or and then of course the warlord, which is significantly monstrous as far as it goes. But you just, I think there's so much more that could be used with them, and I'm hoping that the new Tome, the new Mordenkainen, has the whole right. So we thought about this, and here's what we've got. And you did something with it in that respect. That would, that'd be interesting. But I'm back to the whole, the argument came about that no race should be classified as evil. I agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree. But here you go. You've got a situation where if they are just dwarves, you've got to give them the choice, surely.
Yeah, 100%.
Just because they're bound by these various things and some of their clanmates do this stuff, everyone's got a bad sheep in the family. You're an adventurer. You're not staying underground and causing people to scream lots. Surely that makes you one of the good guys. And yet you turn up at a dwarven stronghold and they all go, "No, outcasts." And you're like, "Thanks, guys. I just came here to sell you some apples."
Yeah.
It's...
We're both on the same page about this. It's like I think from a really interesting historical story, origin story, and then the way it's portrayed, certainly in Mordenkainen, as a sort of like it tries to do like sort of black and white when it definitely isn't. It definitely feels a lot of grey areas here, and I completely agree. I remember now actually we faced a screamer in one of my games, and it was horrible. And but because to the point where we tried to cut the person out of the screamer, we thought, and then obviously they died anyway because that's what we could do. But it's like, it was one of those things where we did not like it at all because we're like, that person's being tortured in there. That's so it's that sort of, again, maybe it's just the way we see our games. Like we see them as people rather than machines.
But you would though, wouldn't you? That's the whole thing. And I've just noticed something here on the Duergar quirks. On a roll of 1, a separate personality in your mind provides advice and guidance to you.
Yes, I did see that one as well.
Well. Dear my tentacled uncle. There we go.
that's a sort of like a nice point on the quirk table, because again, it was quite an interesting one where obviously, as you said, most of them will probably have stayed in the mountainside for a long time, so they'll be in awe of certain things. So there's one in the quirk table saying, "Oh, you are amazed every time water falls from the sky," or you have a parasol to prevent this." And I thought, actually, I think that was quite cute. I quite like that as a little quirk, because again, it's not like, it's that sort of wonder rather than like fear. Like, what is this? Why does it keep happening? Oh, and maybe having like a dwarven character that has a little notebook of all the different kinds of weather, and little rain. It goes, "This is the third time of rain we've experienced like this," and. I mean, because I like that as a little sort of quirk that's not necessarily a harmful stereotype or anything like that, but it's actually an interesting one to be like, oh, the sky.
As opposed to the one at the bottom end of those quirks, which I thought was very curious, because for dwarves, you avoid contact with other dwarves since you mistrust those who would leave their strongholds.
But you've left your stronghold.
What the hell?
I put that one.
Is it because you're just untrustworthy? Is that what the problem is? Therefore, everybody else must be. It's like,
it's like do as I say and not as I do. So like, why have you left your stronghold? I have a reason. Why have you?
What are you doing out here?
I was here. Yeah,
it's like a debate in the Houses of Parliament. Why are you doing this? But you're doing this as well. It doesn't matter. You're doing it first. It's like,
I agree.
But it's I think there's so much more that could be gone into it, but it's. And the artwork that's in there as well, you've got the bit where, there we go, page 78 it is, and you've got all the Duergar sat there, and there's a brain floating in the air, and you're like, really?
Yeah.
Well, is that past? Is that present?
Yeah, is that happening now? Yeah.
Is the reason they don't come out because they've got a brain floating in the air every once in a while? I mean, it's a decoration, Lord Moradin. Yeah, really it is. What happened? Well, we brought this thing to you. It's this big orb. Yeah. What does it do? Nothing. It's just ornamental. Yeah. Yeah, we're just going to roll it into this dwarven stronghold here. Yeah, see what happens.
Don't worry about it. I will say one of my favorite pieces in this chapter. It's near towards the end where it's about inside the stronghold of the Duergar one, and it just looks, for me, it's like Gates of Mordor, very uniform-esque, and again, it really is that sort of thing. Going, it's not about the beauty of it. It is just like, this is what it does, and it just gets the smokes coming up and everything. It looks
it's brutalist architecture.
Yes, and I love brutalist architecture.
Love it. Yeah, no problem at all. I've got no issue with that. There it is.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. Of architecture styles, I prefer Art Deco, but at the same time, there's that moment of, but what have you got? You've got something that's completely functional.
Yes.
Right. What's wrong with that?
Nothing.
Nothing at all. You look at many countries that, aren't England, and they're filled with stuff like this. And you look at new office blocks, and it's like, they're not going to call it brutalist, but my Christ, it is. Look at it. I mean, what is it?
Efficiency and quantity over quality. So.
What are we going to have? Open plan. Well, that doesn't work. Well, we know it doesn't work. What are we going to do instead? I know. Let's build offices that look like beehives. Everyone has to walk into their little own cubicle and they can't see it.
Yeah, it's all in the honeycombs, trapped forever.
And all you can see is the people on the other side also sitting in their honeycombs going, help me!
They're taking my honey!
Steal someone's sandwiches and just call it honey, yes. Not words.
Well, John, thank you so much. I think we've covered so much there in this relatively about 20 pages or so. And like I said, I gained a lot out of it. I do feel now that I do feel like I want to play Dwarves more, and I definitely want to make sure, like, if I did really look into having that good backstory and making sure the reason I was adventuring or out is connected in some way. And and it's just an interesting way, as we sort of compared that Duergar to dwarves, what would happen if we did come across some Duergar or another clan? Because again, it talks about this idea of rivalries or being friends, but from a distance. It's like, are you always friends with dwarves? Just because they're dwarves, do we all look the same? Do we all know each other? I loved it as an interesting. Like I said, there's definitely bits of the chapter where I'm not so sure about, but I appreciate certainly that first beginning bit of the history of it. And then I think, going forward, I would definitely, as we've pretty much discussed to death, no evil stuff, just make it as grey as we can.
Just make it clear. It's not a problem. I mean, for me, the Duergar are, I played Shadowrun quite a lot and Street Samurai. Okay, well, I see here there's Duergar Despot.
Mm-hmm.
What's that if not a Dwarven Street Samurai? Yeah, I'll have that. No problem. Yeah, give us that. No problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
What's this? Well, it's not my real arm, but something that's got claws in it. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah. And it runs the line dangerously between the two, but I really want to see them make it so that you can do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, agreed.
There is no limit. There is no, you must be this if you are this.
Mm-hmm.
Which runs, for me, contrary to the very ideals that it was founded on, which I appreciate there's going to be a million people out there who argue that, and it's fine, bring it on, no worries. But, it's... No, I've loved every part of this. And I like the fact that it was written in such a way that I've disagreed with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I also like, because there's that moment of, no problem at all. I cared enough to actually disagree.
Yes.
Which, okay, win. If I'd read it and gone, yeah, that'll make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wouldn't have thought about it 1 second further. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, maybe they're all lithids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, take that.
I like that. I think that's true. I think that's certainly with Mordenkainen and probably with other books as well. When we look back at them, it's like, actually, I don't agree with everything, and that's okay. And I think it's just taking that moment to do a critique of a book rather than criticize it. And I think that's something I've discovered recently. There's obviously a lot of criticism towards D&D, which is completely valid, but it's not a critique. And it's like, well, what can we do to make it better? Like, point to people who are making those changes in homebrew stuff, in DM's Guild. I want to see that, and we got to keep signposting and stuff like that, because otherwise we won't question it. We'll just go, we'll just say, yeah, I guess, okay, great.
That's just the way it is. But no, I've enjoyed myself immensely. Thank you again for having me.
No worries. Well, John, let's do plugs. Hooray! What are you up to? Like, have you got a book coming out? I might have heard about that. So.
Curiously enough, tomorrow, in fact, I do have books arriving. It's all good.
Yeah.
So my second book, which is my first novel, which is Ocean of Stars, available now from Luna Press. But yes, there's that. There's more conventions, which, let's be fair, this is me. There's always going to be conventions. All those interested, though, we're next to Aircon in 2 weeks' time. Mm-hmm. So 2 weeks, that'll actually be the 12th of March or thereabouts. Because the thought occurs this won't go out in 2 weeks' time, so there we go. And then UK Games Expo after that. There's going to be something interesting there.
Yeah.
As I'm sure, Fiona, you can mention later on at some point. But yes, indeed. So yes, that too. But overall, it's a busy time.
For me, I always see you as the busiest man on the UK gaming scene in general. I'm like, what's John up to? Yeah. A lot of fun stuff, and also writing, and also being a DM for our silly campaign.
I'm not going to use the word fun.
Fine, I'll use it for you. How's that?
There we go.
Cool. Well, I'll just wrap up. I've been your host, Fiona, and I've run the What Am I Rolling podcast, which is a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. As always, it's going very, very well. A couple of solo RPGs coming out, and we'll hopefully at some point have our Paranoia RPG coming out sometime. It should be fun. We've also got a few other bits. We've got some guests, GMs coming on, which I'm very excited for. So we'll have Numenera coming up, which was great fun to run. I played in that, and that was really, really fun. And then finally, there is a offer code for Third Space Gaming, your friendly local game shop in Burnley. If you put into the checkout DMBC, you get 10% off your first order. And that could be anything. But I also just want to plug John's book. I've pre-ordered it. I can't wait. I saw the cover and I was like, I remember us talking about this. So I was very, very excited to do that pre-order. And that's all I have to say on the subject. With that, thank you so much for listening, and we will speak to you, see you. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.